Hey everyone, really excited to share this with you today. So recently had a high-level ballet student, an aspiring pre-professional ballet student who came through, and I was able to take her through the functional movement screen and the fundamental capacity screen. So we, in essence, took a look at her performance foundation. What is the foundation on top of which that she is attempting to build skill? And I want to review this here. I didn't really understand the power of this very simple sketch, this performance pyramid, until a few years ago. But I love talking this over with athletes when we take a look at their functional movement. So what we have here, what we're really assessing, is their ability to acquire skill. And we do that by taking a look at the movement foundation and the performance foundation on top of which they're building. And so you have several different representations here. This is kind of optimal for the developing athlete. If you have a really good movement foundation and a really good performance foundation, then you have a lot of area to really lean into and develop skill and acquire skill. More often than not, this is what we see. We see something like this. And in her case, we really ran into this. She actually has quite a good movement foundation and a significantly good performance foundation. And so we've teased out a couple of areas where she can improve here so that she becomes more efficient at acquiring skill. It is possible that with some of her limitations, she's bumping up against an ability to expand this skill level, kind of the pinnacle, the top layer of the performance foundation. So if we can just tweak a few areas here, then it'll probably be easier for her to continue to acquire skill. And what we run into most of the time, we did not run into in her case, but most of the time in most sports, we run into a performance pyramid that looks like this. They don't have adequate movement, and they're chasing capacity. So they're really hitting the weights hard. They're working on plyometrics. They're working on power, Olympic lifts. They're doing everything they can to improve their capacity level, their performance foundation. And so their ability to acquire more skill is really limited by their movement foundation. What's significant about this performance pyramid over here is that because of the limitations in movement and because they've actually exceeded, in many cases, their performance layer has gone beyond their movement level, they've created an issue where they're at risk for a non-contact or an overuse injury. You can see if you don't move very well, but you have a really, really big engine, something is likely to give out, something is likely to break. So that's a brief overview. Let's go ahead and move on into her screening reports. Okay, so we will go ahead and begin with her functional movement screen report. And so this is just a really great snapshot. I love the visual representation here because it just allows you to see so very clearly where you need to spend your time, and more importantly, where you can stop wasting your time. So there's a lot of green here, which I love. Once again, for those of you who've seen this before, we don't care about 2s and 3s. For those of you who haven't seen this before, we don't care about 2s and 3s. If you see green, that means we get to move on. 2 is an adequate level of movement, of functional movement. A 3 means that we're perfect. So if you see a 2 or if you see a 3, if you see green, that means we don't have to worry, we don't have to spend more time in that area. What we do care about are yellows and reds. We care about 0s and 1s, and thankfully this athlete doesn't have any 0s. 0 means pain. 1 means that we don't have adequate control of that movement. But let's start up here in the yellow categories. Now you can see this particular test, this part of the assessment, the inline lunge, she performed perfectly on both sides. She has 3s on both sides. If we unpack a category within that movement, within that test, the ankle clearing test, you can see we have green on one side, and then on the right side we have a yellow. Yellow means that there is a movement deficiency. And because there's green on the left and yellow on the right, we have an asymmetry. That's why we have a perfect score of a 3 that is colored, that is shaded yellow. If we clean up this right ankle, we restore adequate ankle mobility, we take her out of an injury risk category, and it's going to be easier for her to acquire skill in areas of her sport, in areas of ballet that require significant ankle mobility. So anytime there's a leap, a bound, a plie, something where she has to squat down into a certain movement, that is going to be more symmetrical on both sides and less likely to create an overuse injury type scenario. Same thing on shoulder mobility. So she's got a 2 and a 3. A 2 is adequate, 2 is green. However, there's an asymmetry here. She moves better on the left than she moves on the right. So even though we have adequate movement, we categorize that as yellow, and we want to make sure that we clean that motion up, that movement up, so that we take her out of that potential risk category for an overuse injury. Now down at the 1 here, down at the red level, we see this with ballet students all the time. It's amazing how hard they work on their core stability, and yet they're unable to coordinate their upper and lower body. They're unable to use all of that strength that they developed through the midsection, through kind of that transition zone between the upper and lower body, and coordinate the upper and lower body with adequate stability. So again, a very, very clear target here. This layer right here does have to do with core stability, functional core movement, dynamic stability. And so as we lean into this, she's going to find that skill acquisition is going to come much more easily in some of those movements that maybe she's had a little bit of difficulty leaning into. And so now we move into the fundamental capacity screen. And so a lot of jumping here, a lot of power expression, plyometrics, but we also assess movement control and postural control. And what I love about the fundamental capacity screen is we kind of go back into that discussion about the neurodevelopmental sequence. How do babies develop into athletic toddlers, in a sense? When we're developing through those early years, when we're developing our physical capacities in those early years, we learn how to crawl and then carry and then jump and then run. And so that's what we're evaluating here. We're evaluating movement control. So basically this is the crawl stage. Postural control, which is the carry stage. So once you go from crawling to walking, the first thing you do is pick things up and carry it around. And so how well can you stay organized? How good is your core stability when you are moving under load? And then explosive control. So we then learn, once we're carrying things and we have good stability, running around and carrying heavy items, then we take a look at explosiveness, and from explosiveness, we look at impact control, which is basically just your plyometric capacity, your ability to recycle and reuse energy. In essence, how efficient are you when you're running? But again, when we talk about impact control, that means bounding, that means just about anything where plyometric capacity is called into play. So this is her symmetry compass. We're going to go all the way back up here at the beginning to her performance report, and you can see once again, these are the two areas where she does not have to spend any more time right now. She is very efficient with regard to movement control and postural control, and ever so slightly deficient, borderline deficient in explosiveness. But this area right here, her plyometric ability, her impact control, this is where she is going to make tremendous gains in her ability to acquire and develop skill. If we take another simple look, a simple representation of this, you can see this is where her significant deficiency lies, and so this is what we're going to lean into. We can work a little bit on explosiveness, but we're really going to look at that neurologic ability to recycle and reuse energy. And then we come down here and take another look, a little more specific, and there's that elastic jump. This is where we really need to spend some time, and we fill this in. You can see just how competent she is in these other areas. She does not need any more work in these areas here. This is where we're going to spend our time. So I hope that was informative. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If that's something that interests you, give me a call, and we can knock this out. We can knock these reports out in one session, begin developing a plan for you so that you know specifically what you need to target, and more importantly, the specific areas that you do not need to target. It just makes skill development, skill acquisition just that much more efficient. So thanks so much for watching. I look forward to talking to you again soon.